This is the Rusk Report, a program that takes an inside look at Western New York with news, features, and special guests. Now, here's your host, Brian Rusk.
Welcome to the Rusk Report on ESPN 1520. We have an interesting program today about something that's very important in Western New York State, and this is a grant that came through from the Earl I. Mack Foundation for Damon College, and it has to do with Finland and Western New York. With us today is Dr. Elizabeth Wright, and she's the Associate Dean for Education at Damon College. She joined the Damon College Education Department in 2006 and formerly served from 2006 to 2012 as the Executive Director of the Thomas Reynolds Center for Special Education and After-School Programs. Ms. Wright teaches special education laws and trends to Education Department graduate students as well as the Graduate Special Education Research Seminar, Dr. Liz Wright of Damon College. And we're going to talk today about what started some 3 years ago with the Earl I. Mack Foundation and Fulbright, and relations were developed between Damon College's Department of Education and a university with an education department in Finland. Tell us, what are these relationships, Dr. Liz Wright?
Well, first of all, I think we've been very fortunate to have a relationship with the Earl I. Mack Foundation through some seed money that he gave to us in 2012. I was able to travel over to Finland and begin establishing relationships both in Helsinki and in Jyväskylä, Finland, which is about 3 hours north of Finland. As the relationships progressed, we decided that the best way for us to really learn more about the Finnish educational system and ways we could meaningfully incorporate the Finnish educational system here in Western New York would be to send a contingent of individuals over to Finland. And the Mack Foundation was instrumental in sending 8 of us over to Finland in the fall of 2012. This was on the heels of my first visit. So 8 of us went over. We came up with a strategy for once we met with folks there, and we developed some additional relationships with the University of Jyväskylä. We came up with a strategy for how we could further develop our professional relationships, a research agenda, and some meaningful opportunities here in Buffalo. So what we decided to do when we got back from that trip was apply to Fulbright, to have a Fulbright Scholar in Residence come to Damon College, and really to help us better understand the Finnish educational system. And to make a long story short, out of that, we have been able to develop an international exchange program with the University of Jyväskylä. So currently I have 2 graduate students, one from Damon College and one from Niagara University, over at the University of Jyväskylä. And our idea with that project was to have a consortium that we would build of regional teacher prep programs where interested teacher prep programs would be able to send students over to the University of Jyväskylä to learn how Finland prepares its teachers. So currently we have 2 students over there, and at the same time, we've developed a research agenda with the University of Jyväskylä, and we are studying the attitudes and values of these teachers that are over there and how the exchange process is impacting and changing their attitudes and values in relation to the teaching profession. The third thing that we started as a result of these relationships that go all the way back to 2012 now is the idea came up to start a charter school here in Western New York. And now initially when we were talking about that concept, we were talking about having a primary grade school. But as the relationships progressed and we kept hearing reports about failing Buffalo schools and the statistics that, I think that in 2014, 52.8% of our young people in the city of Buffalo graduated.
That's terrible. Just terrible.
It's
terrible.
as we heard more and more reports like that, and hearing reports about some of our...
And I understand two of the schools had 80% dropout rate, too.
Yeah, we were discouraged by that. And from visiting Finland, we really were enamored with the way they structure their high schools, the professionalized atmosphere in those schools for teachers, and a lot of other things, which I'll get into when we talk about the charter. But I think for us, we realized very quickly that what we needed to do, and I really have to credit Dr. Brogan for this, Mike Brogan, our vice president, he was concerned enough as a Buffalo resident to say to me, Liz, let's think about a charter high school. Let's not keep it at the primary level, because it would take so many years for those students to get up to the high school level. We'd have years and years of students not benefiting from the high school. Mm-hmm. So we dove in with both feet, and we're currently in the charter school application process with the state of New York, and that's a very rigorous process. It's not something that just anybody can decide to do. We're at the letter of intent phase. So February 10th, we will be filing, so that's next Tuesday, we'll be filing our letter of intent. We get a decision on that, and then if we're invited, we will put forward our full application on March 20th. But we have, in my opinion, successfully combined the rigor and requirements of what it takes to confer Regents diplomas here in the state of New York with key elements of the Finnish educational model at the upper secondary level.
Well, it sounds very exciting. We're learning all about the exchange program with Damon College and the Jyväskylä Faculty of Education in Finland. So it's
Correct.
Very exciting. Our guest today is Dr. Liz Wright. Now, you have educational partnerships and involving research and international student exchange. Let's talk some more about these educational partnerships. Dr. Liz Wright, Associate Dean for Education at Damon College.
Yes, one of the really exciting aspects of really this three-pronged relationship that we have developed with the University of Jyväskylä is this international exchange for our graduate students who are preparing to be teachers. These are students who are at the master's level studying to be teachers here in the United States. And through the Earl I. Mack Foundation, we were able to receive pilot funds to send an initial small group of students over to the University of Jyväskylä in Finland. So for the third time this past January, early in January, I went back to Finland. I took the two students with me. Mm-hmm. They're currently enrolled in a sequence of graduate classes over at the University of Jyväskylä School of Education. And our colleague that came over here through Fulbright is working with them there, and that is Dr. Tina Cylinder. She's the chair of the Faculty of Education at the University of Jyväskylä, so she's received those students. We had an additional Fulbright scholar come over, Dr. Riikka Alonen, and she was here the entire fall semester. And that's where the research project comes in. We asked Dr. Alonen specifically, and I believe she was on your show.
Yes, she was very good, and we got a lot of calls from New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania. She was very good.
Yes.
With Dr. Brogan.
With Dr. Brogan. Mm-hmm. And so she came, and her specific task through Fulbright was to help us to develop a meaningful research agenda so that these relationships don't just stop if funding stops. These are professional relationships that'll continue well beyond funding. So Dr. Alonen and Dr. Chris Yoon from the University of Buffalo are involved in this project, as well as Dr. Brown, Dr. Mark Brown, who's on the Faculty of Education at Damon. Mm-hmm. And while Riikka was here in the fall, we used the pilot money that we received from the Mack Foundation to have a group of Finnish scholars come over to Damon College for a week. So the first week in November was this intensive work session where we were planning the charter school, planning our research project, and planning the exchange all at the same time. And we did get all three things done. And so, I feel like we've been a good steward of the funding we received, and I think we're going to have some really interesting outcomes to report, both in the professional literature we're hoping to publish, and also I think these students are going to have a very interesting story to tell when they come back. Part of the research is that we're having them keep weekly field journals of their experiences in Finland. And some of the things that they've been reporting back have been really interesting. For example, I'll just give you one anecdote.
Sure.
In Finland, in Jyväskylä, even though the weather is very similar to here in Buffalo and there's snow everywhere, the majority of people in Finland continue to ride their bicycles all winter long, and they put snow tires on the bikes. And they just plow right through the snow and keep going. And so there's actually a lot in common between, I think, between Finland and Western New York. We tend to keep going when the snow falls, too.
We had it
maybe not on bicycles
today.
Yes, but maybe not on bicycles.
For those who just tuned in to the Rusk Report, you're listening to ESPN Radio, AM 1520, with our 50,000 watts of clear channel power. We'd like to hear from you. Please write to Brian Rusk, ESPN Radio, 500 Corporate Parkway, Suite 200, Buffalo, New York, 14226. This station has received letters as far away as Scandinavia and New Zealand, so we'd like to hear from you and many of our Canadian listeners. U.S. listeners, if you're listening in Buffalo or Manhattan or Washington, drop us a note. We'd like to hear from you. A little bit more information about Dr. Liz Wright. She earned her Juris Doctorate and Master of Social Work from the University of Buffalo in '97 and her undergraduate degree in Literature and Rhetoric and Political Science dual major at State University of New York at Binghamton, where she graduated summa cum laude and was awarded membership in Phi Beta Kappa. Prior to serving as executive director of the center, Dr. Wright, then a partner at Goldstein, Ackerholt, and Pletcher, practiced law in the areas of education law, special education law, and estate planning for families with children who have special needs. And Dr. Wright is the Associate Dean for the Education Department at Damon College in Amherst, New York. I'd like to mention also that we've been talking about the Earl I. Mack Foundation, as he has been a guest on this program many times. He's former chairman of the New York State Council on the Arts. He was involved with the company that is on the New York Stock Exchange called Mack Cali, and he was United States Ambassador to Finland. Let's talk about this Center for International Teacher and Educator Preparation that Damon College established. Dr. Wright?
Yes, that's an interesting piece that goes along with creating a consortium of the regional teacher-educator preparation programs, teacher and educator preparation programs here in Western New York. And what we have done is set up a center at Damon College, which I am currently running, that is designed specifically to facilitate international relationships with Finland. If it were to expand from that, we'd be very happy. Right now, we're content with the fact that we've developed some very deep, long-standing relationships with our colleagues at the University of Jyväskylä. And what we're looking to do is to provide regional teacher candidates the opportunity to go abroad, to experience what teacher preparation looks like in Finland, and eventually to have Finnish students come over to Western New York and experience our schools as well. And that ties in with the charter school, because what we're looking to do is make that charter school a professional development school model that's linked with our regional teacher preparation programs. So we would have student teachers in that building. We would have the opportunity for our teacher candidates to do field experiences in that building. And in addition, and I think the interesting piece here is that we would be looking to have that school have meaningful relationships with schools in Jyväskylä. So the teachers that are there at the charter school as well as the students will have international opportunities as well. We haven't talked about the model yet for the charter school. I don't know if this would be a good time, but
Please, go ahead.
I think it's important for people to understand what we're trying to do. We would look to have a chief academic officer that's from America running the school. The need to do that is because there are so many compliance issues here in New York State and requirements. We have to make sure that we're in compliance as a charter school. That said, we're looking to have additional leadership in that school for curriculum and school culture, and that person will be from Finland. And we'll be partnering with EduCluster Finland, which is affiliated with the University of Jyväskylä, to recruit that Finnish talent to come to the school. So we're looking to create a school climate and culture that mirrors the type of school climate and culture that you find in the Finnish upper secondary schools. What you find in those schools and what we've built into our application for a charter school are some very key pieces. First of all, there's a block schedule for students. They have 90-minute blocks with 15-minute breaks in between. There's not a 4-minute change of classes, and there's not a 40-minute class. We find that, and Finnish pedagogy dictates, that if you have longer class periods, there's more opportunity for student collaboration, there's more opportunity for project-based learning. It's a more humane environment for the students because they actually have time to collaborate and work on these projects within that period of time. And then the 15-minute breaks in between allow for the students to decompress. The other thing we're doing that is very interesting is that we are taking the Regents curriculum and we're breaking it down. Instead of semesters, we have trimesters with 2 periods in each trimester. And so you have 5 weeks of instruction followed by a testing week. What that allows us to do is to chunk the Regents materials in meaningful pieces. Instead of having a student take one class all year long, then sit for the exam, which he or she may fail and not have any idea how they're doing. Rather, we're breaking up that same information into meaningful content-based pieces. We're going to do some curriculum-based measures in that testing week so the student will know all the way along how they're doing in that material, and it gives us an opportunity for remediation. That's going to be important, too, for our English language learners and for our students with disabilities. Chunking of material is a really good strategy for that type of learner.
We're learning a great deal from our guest today, Dr. Elizabeth R. Wright, Associate Dean for the Damon College Education Department in Amherst, New York. I'd like to thank those who've called regarding our recent guest, Miriam Hellreich, who is the National Republican State Committeewoman from Hawaii, Al Podell, who recently wrote a book on visiting every country in the world in our program on multiple sclerosis. Next week, we're going to have Dr. Wright's boss on this program, as he just received a prestigious appointment. Dr. Gary Olson, president of Damon College, will be on next week. If you have any thoughts or comments, if you're listening in Toronto or Buffalo or Northern Florida, drop us a note. We'd like to hear from you. Please write to Brian Rusk, ESPN Radio, 500 Corporate Parkway, Suite 200, Buffalo, New York, 14226. A little bit more information about Dr. Elizabeth Wright, Associate Dean for the Education Department for Damon College in Amherst, New York. She is admitted to practice law in both New York State and Federal District Court. Dr. Wright presents regularly at national and regional conferences regarding the research undertaken at the Thomas Reynolds Center and has led the department through both NYS rate and national accreditation. Since 2012, Dr. Wright has been working on international education projects with Finland in her capacity as Associate Dean, and these projects have been funded through the generosity of Ambassador Earl Imack and his Foundation. Let's talk a little bit more about this plan to regionalize teacher candidate exposure to Finland's teacher training model. What's so special about this?
Well, I think as competitive private schools regionally, you have a tendency to be in a silo. And I think that while that remains true, and we are, looking to grow the attendance in our individual schools, there is a need to look at the greater good. And here in Western New York, particularly in Buffalo, we're seeing a pattern of student failure. I alluded or mentioned earlier that, we have a 52.8% graduation rate in Buffalo right now. All of that can't be laid at the teacher's feet. But on the other hand, I think if we can get some different, fresh, pedagogical perspectives from another country that's one of the top educational systems in the world, it doesn't hurt for us to do that. That doesn't mean that what we do through the consortium or what we do at this charter school is the only way to approach education. But it may be a good way, and it may be one that should be replicated in our city schools. I think it deserves a chance to find out. Because, when you look at a statistic like that, I think that, it's so shocking, first of all, that we could have that many students who aren't able to even get a high school diploma coming out of this region. And when you look at all the money that's been infused into the region for economic development, it's very disconcerting for me to think that our children won't be the ones able to get that job.
Yes, it's very upsetting when our children and grandchildren are leaving New York State.
Absolutely.
And we're hoping they could be educated and employable here.
Especially when we're seeing the jobs coming in now.
Yeah.
So let's train them up to do those jobs. And I think that it would be a mistake for our teacher preparation programs to assume that this has nothing to do with them. I think the whole entire educational system is under attack right now. So, it's really easy to point fingers and lay blame. But I'm more about let's look for proactive solutions and things that we can do that may make a difference.
We're talking about the educational program with the Earl I. Mack Foundation and Fulbright and Damon College's Department of Education and the University of Jyväskylä Faculty of Education in Finland. Let's talk about what you're leading with an applicant group to create the Aurora Academy Charter High School in Buffalo. Tell us more about that, Dr. Liz Wright with Damon College.
We're very excited about the charter application that we will hopefully be filing. We're filing the letter of intent next Tuesday, the 10th. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've incorporated as many elements of the Finnish educational system as we feel are appropriate given the parameters of New York state law. One of those is our block schedule. The other is the calendar, which I also mentioned. In addition, we're looking to meaningfully incorporate some vocational opportunities for students that attend that school. I had mentioned that we're looking to make the school a professional development school as a model school for teacher training. We want to extend an opportunity through the consortium to have seniors at the school decide if they want to take some teacher preparation courses during their senior year, and then they can roll up into regional teacher preparation programs depending on their interest and field of study. But for those students who don't have an interest in going on to higher ed, we want to have some options available for them until they make some other decisions in their life. So one of the opportunities we'll have available is the ability to take classes as a senior so that you can become a teacher aide in a classroom, a one-on-one aide or a class aide. Also so that you can take the courses you would need to be a teacher's assistant. When you're a teacher's assistant, you're not responsible for the curriculum or the pedagogy, but you do implement that teacher's lesson plans there in the class. So there's some meaningful alternatives. The other things we're infusing in from Finland is the idea that everyone should receive free breakfast and lunch. That removes stigma around the idea of free and reduced lunch. So we plan on, of course, federal law dictates that you designate who is eligible for that, but at the same time, we will supplement those who are eligible with a budget allotment to make sure that all the students receive the free lunch and breakfast. So that's going to be part of the students' day. The other thing we're going to build into the day is some social and emotional supports for the students. Every Monday they'll have a peer group that meets one period called sisu. And sisu is an interesting word. That's a Finnish word. It means perseverance against all odds. And we're planning on having our students receive a curriculum that's based on the work of Angela Lee Duckworth. She's done a lot of studies on grit and what makes a student persevere, no matter what their socioeconomic background. We're also going to incorporate some of the work of Daniel Pink. He has some really interesting ideas on drive and what motivates people. And as it turns out in his book, he espouses the idea that the main factor in what drives people is the ability to direct your own life. And so one of the main themes for our charter school is the idea of individual pathways for learning. And that's taken right out of the Finnish educational model. Students at the high school level select a tray, which creates their personal schedule. And it's very different from the way things are done here in the United States, and we've encapsulated all of that in our application. So while meeting Regents requirements. So when you think about the mental gymnastics that my Finnish colleagues and I had to go through to make the Finnish schedule, block schedule, and this idea of individual pathways through these trays mesh with the Regents requirements, it was something.
Well, I'm sure it was tough. I'm sorry we have to bring the Rusk Report to a close. Special thanks to Dr. Liz Wright, Associate Dean for the Damon College Education Department, and Kevin Carr, Director of Production for the last 15 years. Thank you for enlightening us, Dr. Elizabeth Wright with Damon College. Have a great week.